Let's dive back into these shark-infested waters once again as we continue along with SOS, Summer of Sharks. Welcome back to Wrestling with Horror. My name is Andrew Dreamer. Last time on the channel we looked at Sharkenstein, and that was a fever dream of a movie. Well, today is actually going to be another step in the right direction. I went searching for a new film to sink my teeth into, and I came across this 90s shark movie that I'd never seen before. That being said, let's take a look at Shark Attack. Despite the generic title, this film isn't quite as bad as some reviews online would have you think, especially if you like the cast. Shark Attack stars Casper Van Dien, best known for his role in Starship Troopers. Alongside him is going to be Ernie Hudson. Now, Casper Van Dien's inclusion in this film was probably one of the bigger reasons that I actually enjoyed it a little bit, because I was a pretty big fan of Starship Troopers when I was growing up. Now, unlike the previous two films that we've looked at, this film actually has a little bit of a budget to work with. But what exactly did they do with that budget? So, let's send out an SOS and find out. Shark Attack follows Stephen McCrae, a marine biologist who travels to Port Amanzi in Africa after receiving an email from his friend Mark DeSantis. Mr. DeSantis isn't a governor though, because once Stephen arrives at the small fishing village, he learns that his friend has become shark food. Upon his arrival, he's greeted by a wealthy businessman named Lawrence Rhodes. This American nightmare is not on a quest to finish the story though. He's actually trying to buy up the entire village to sell it for his own selfish greed. We'll learn more about this later in the third act, so let's just move on for now. Mr. Rhodes sets Stephen up with a new lifelong best friend named Manny, a local fisherman who is turned into a taxi driver because of the recent shark attacks and the disappearance of all the fish around the area. Manny takes Stephen to the local research facility where he meets up with another colleague of his, Dr. Miles Crane, who then informs him of his friend's passing away. He also tells Stephen that Mark DeSantis' sister is still in town. So then Stephen goes to a local bar to meet up with her. At the bar, he learns that she is still very distraught about the death of her brother, as, one would be. And she kind of takes it out on Stephen, putting some of her anger on him. It's at this point that some local fishermen come up to Stephen and Corinne and start kind of harassing them, saying that they're not allowed to be in the bar because it's a fisherman-only bar. See, all the fishermen in this village they blame the Americans for the shark attacks and all the fish disappearing, basically taking their livelihoods away from them. Later on, Stephen and Corinne are heading to her brother's boat to kind of investigate a little bit, to try to see if they can find any clues about what he was doing, what he was working on when he died. As they're walking down onto the dock, they're confronted by that fisherman once again. Only this time, a shark swimming nearby is not happy with the amount of screen time that it's gotten up to this point in the film, so it decides to attack a small child on a boat. It also takes a big chunk out of the boat. Stephen and the local fisherman that he had a fight with actually dive into the water to try to save the kid. They do successfully get the kid out of the water, but they also come out with a mutual respect for each other. They shake hands, they part ways, and that's the end of that. Stephen and Corinne continue their search in the area where Mark was diving a lot. They travel to this little lagoon that's kind of off of the ocean, enlisting Manny's help to get them there. Once there, they dive down into this shipwreck that's at the bottom of the lagoon, and they find this big barrel sitting at the bottom of the shipwreck that is holding some sort of device in it. Stephen says that it's called a thumper, and what it does is basically it lures sharks to the area, and they wonder why somebody would do this. It's at this point another shark is frankly fed up with the amount of screen time that it's getting, and he tries to attack them, but he doesn't stick around very long. He's just a little camera shy. So Stephen and Corinne go back to the surface, only they get caught up in some sort of net that gets thrown over them. They cut themselves free and go back up to the surface. Once they're up on the surface, they realize that there is this local tribe around them they're all yelling at them. And Manny tells them that they're mad because they're not supposed to be there and their presence is not welcome, so they quickly skedaddle. They once again confront Miles about what's going on in this little village. He tells them that Mark was using these devices to sort of corral the sharks to try to deal with the shark problem. Another problem is just how fishy that Miles is acting about the entire thing. His reaction actually sends them back to that lagoon that very night. And what they try to do is they go fishing, kind of. They catch this shark. They try to pull it up onto the boat. Steven's plan is to tranquilize the shark. Unfortunately, the shark doesn't want to be tranquilized, so that leads to Manny actually using this device to kill the shark. So once they have the shark dead, they kind of cut it open and they look at its insides and they realize that the organs are kind of disfigured, indicating some sort of disease within the shark. And once again, they go back to Miles, who tells them that it's actually cancer, and that's what he's working on is an experimental drug to cure cancer. And the sharks have they're having an adverse reaction to it. He's doing some testing on them, and he's actually been giving this drug to some local people around the village as well. He takes Steven and Corinne to the hospital to kind of show them what he's been working on. This stuff actually really angers Steven, who tells them that he only came here so he could escape the FDA and all the regulations. The next day, Steven and Corinne get into a shark cage and they get into the water. They're attached to Manny's boat and they're looking around just right off the beach, and they find several more of these devices that are luring sharks in, and they kind of keep turning them off, and then suddenly here comes another shark just begging to be in the movie. And of course they're shy, so they don't stick around very long. Here's where it gets interesting. Suddenly their cage detaches from the boat and they fall to the bottom of the ocean. They have to kind of MacGyver their way up and get out of there again. And once they get back to the boat, what are they going to find? Surely Manny didn't betray them, right? Well, when they get back up to the boat, they find Manny unconscious, looking like he just took a major unprotected chair shot to the head. It's at this time that we see two men from afar watching them through a pair of binoculars. That night, Casper, the friendly marine biologist, and Corinne are knocked out once they get back to their hotel rooms and kidnapped. They're taken back to Colsey Lagoon, and they're tied up and they're kind of thrown overboard, where they immediately swim down to the wreck. And here is a part that I left out before when they were diving down there. One of their air tanks actually came off and went back down into that shipwreck, so they smartly go down there, they get the air tank, and they can breathe, they cut themselves free, and they swim to shore, getting away. When they get back to their hotel, they find that all of their research and all of the devices have gone missing. They tell Mr. Rhodes about this, and he tells them to wait in his office until the police arrive. He's going to go get them some beverages or snacks or whatever wealthy people want to bring them. Finally, the police show up, and when they look outside to see the policemen get out of the car, who is it? The men that kidnapped them are the police. So they immediately run away. They get into Manny's car, and he takes off, getting out of there quick. And we get this huge action chase scene that includes an explosion and car chases, and it's intense. In most normal instances, this would be a pretty easy chase for the police, but luckily, their getaway driver is Manny, whose last name must be Andretti because he drives like a pro. They finally escape from the police and go directly to the medical clinic, where they're trying to look for proof of Miles' wrongdoing. It's here that they discover that the drug that Miles is actually giving to these patients is killing them. They find this child that he gave the drug to, and the cancer is back and it's worse, and the drug is actually killing this child. Steven and Corinne then sneak their way into the research facility where they find medical records of all of the patients that have died because of this drug, meaning that Miles knew that it was doing this. And they make a copy of the CD, but that's when they are caught by Miles, and he tells them to turn over the CD, and Steven and Corinne try to run. Steven gets away, Corinne doesn't, and Steven and Manny kind of escape off into the night, leading to another action chase scene, except this time we're not in cars, we're on boats, but like I said, Manny is a pro, and he gets away once again. After another daring escape, Steven goes directly to Mr. Rhodes' office, where he finds out that the wealthy businessman is actually the one who's behind all of this. I mean, who could have seen that coming, right? Not me. Actually, it was me. I saw it coming. It's all about oil and money, and Mr. Rhodes is, like I said, a very greedy, looking out for himself type of person. By now, Steven and Miles have set up a trade. The records for Corinne. Steven goes back to the research facility, where he actually finds Mr. Rhodes already waiting there with Miles. It's at this point that Rhodes kind of divulges his entire plan, stating that he is going to sell the entire village and make a boatload of money off of the oil rights. But here's the twist. Miles didn't actually know that Rhodes was going to do all this. In Miles' head, he was only working on the drug. He was actually trying to help people. He had no idea about the oil and the money and all this stuff. He's not even being paid for this research. He's just there because he wants to help. That doesn't excuse some of the things he was doing, but, he's not all bad. And just when all seems lost, the real hero of this story, Manny, goes on a kamikaze run and launches his boat into the side of the facility. And right behind him are the rest of the local fishermen, fed up with all the Americans and the wealthy businessmen trying to take everything that they own. They storm the facility, and we get another action scene. This one's a big action movie fight scene. A lot of stuff happening, a lot of cuts here. And in the midst of all this chaos, I'm pretty sure that there's still a shark lurking around somewhere. This movie's called Shark Attack, right? During all the ruckus, Mr. Rhodes finds this harpoon gun and he shoots Miles. Miles falls down. He tells Steven, "I'm not all bad." And Steven's like, "I know." Yeah, great acting, Casper. Rhodes runs out of the building where he's got a helicopter waiting for him. He gets in the helicopter. They take off. Steven chases it down, jumps onto the edge of the helicopter like you do in a big action movie. They fight inside the helicopter for just a minute before Steven throws Rhodes out of the helicopter into the water and basically into the waiting jaws of the shark that we have not seen for quite some time. So, all's well that ends well, right? Steven and Corinne are leaving together. They're going to put together a team to come back to help rebuild the village. Steven has made a lifelong best friend in Manny. So, all in all, it's a happy ending, right? Now that we've gotten through the meat of this story, let's take a look at some positives for Shark Attack. As I said earlier, I'm a pretty big fan of Casper Van Dien, so that's obviously going to be a positive for me. Although, I think the biggest positive I have from this film is going to be Manny. He's funny, he's well acted, and in my opinion, he is the real hero of this story. Without him, I don't think that Steven and Corinne could have succeeded in stopping Mr. Rhodes. Another aspect of this film that I'm going to choose to stay positive about are the special effects. They're not that bad. Now, they could have been better, but overall, they're pretty decent. Now, that may be because I just watched 2 films with completely horrible special effects, but I digress. And I really think that the story the filmmakers were trying to tell here is an interesting story. Now, sure, there are aspects of it that didn't really work for me. It's not perfect, but in general, as a whole, I like the story of the movie. It was really interesting. It kept me engaged, I'll say it that way. Another thing that I liked about this movie were the action sequences. As far as action sequences go, these were pretty good, despite the fact that this is a shark movie and we didn't really need a lot of action sequences. The last thing that I'm going to mention is that I really appreciate the fact that they use some actual shark footage throughout the movie. Anytime that we get real shark footage in a shark movie, I'm going to be appreciative of that. I just think it's the right thing to do. If you've got a shark movie, why not? You can find some out there just to throw in. It works. So that's a positive for me as well. Transitioning to the negatives now. I know I said I enjoyed this movie, and I did, but there are still quite a few issues that I have with this film. A lot, actually. First off, the acting is subpar at best. Even the big names in this film seem kind of like they're just phoning it in. They're not giving it their all. Another issue I have is that throughout the film, the cinematography it leaves a lot to be desired. There are like these weird close-up shots during some dialogue scenes, and it almost seems kind of like somebody in the editing room like accidentally zoomed in a shot too much or something like that. And even beyond that, there are some shots throughout the film that are just completely out of focus to the point where it's distracting. My next issue is the third act. And just to be honest with you, this movie kind of falls apart for me in the third act. It just seems rushed, and a lot of the special effects that were pretty decent throughout the rest of the film, they get a heck of a lot worse here. There are also aspects of the story during the third act where it kind of seems like the writers just ran out of ideas toward the end, and that's never a good sign when you're watching a movie or writing a movie. You want to have ideas to finish it up. The ending is the most important part of the movie. My next issue is that there were just too many big action movie sequences for me. Some people might like them, but I didn't find that they were really necessary. I would have much preferred it if they would have just made these sequences like just a little scarier, or heck, I don't know, just spitballing here, replace them with shark sequences. Because you know what? In a movie called Shark Attack, there are actually very few scenes involving sharks. They get very little screen time, and they're almost completely relegated to a subplot. This movie had a lot of potential. I just don't think that they succeeded. I really wish that they would have done more, because I wanted to like this movie more. Moving on to the rating for Shark Attack. Now, as I said, this movie was a step in the right direction, just like the last one was, but this one, it's getting closer to that middle ground for me. And I actually think it might be middle ground. It's just that middle of the road shark movie. Not spectacular, not completely unwatchable. So, with that being said, I'm going to give Shark Attack a 5 out of 10. And I'll just be perfectly honest, if some of the things that I touched on were just a little bit improved upon, like the third act, some of the action sequences, maybe some of that stuff, if they had just worked on that a little bit more or replaced some of that stuff, it could have gone even higher. Like I said, this movie had a lot of potential, and I really wish I could have seen more out of this story. So that's going to wrap up Shark Attack on this episode of SOS Summer of Sharks. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, so if you haven't hit the subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Make sure you're sharing the channel with everybody that you know. I'm really excited for what the future is going to hold. I really think that we can grow our community quite a bit and continue to just grow up and move up in the ranks of the YouTube world. And that's my goal. And I really want to just reach as many people as possible with this channel, talk about horror movies, talk about wrestling, and I'm really enjoying what we're doing right now. Also, if you want to get 20% off of your order at redcon1.com, make sure you're using the code AndrewDreamer at checkout for 20% off. It's a good deal. They've got great products. I use their stuff all the time when I'm at the gym, just clothes to wear around. I use their stuff all the time, so make sure that you use that code, get 20% off of your order. All of that being said, I'm going to sign off for now. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.